Hello. Today we are looking at chapter 24 in Grout, Beethoven and the Revolutionary Period. And I want to just talk about a couple of aspects of that period before we get into the music of that. So when we think in terms of that time period, we're wrapping up the 1700s or the 18th century, moving into the 1800s. And Beethoven, his time period is from he was born in 1770. He died in 1827. Now that gives me an opportunity to pause and say a couple of things. One of the things is that I have to trust that you're watching these videos and so on. I'd like for you to do is to take a few notes. So take a pause in just a minute, take a pause and either open up an email to me or grab a piece of paper and pencil. And as I'm chatting, I'm going to ask you to just put in a couple of bits of information and then give that to me either in class or slip it under my door or email that to me so that I have a record of your paying attention, if you will. Before I do, okay, so now take a moment, pause the video, and go do that. Meanwhile, I'm going to open a screen. Okay, here we go. I'm sharing the actual PowerPoint slides from Grout. This is chapter 24. There are books over there you can read. And we want to talk briefly about the French Revolution. Okay, so the 1700s is the Enlightenment period. We've talked about the Enlightenment and some of the characteristics of the Enlightenment. One of those being this rise of the Greek thought of the perfection, if you will, of humanity and humans can be, in a sense, perfect in and of themselves. Part of the Greek thing that's brought back is this idea of democracy. Up until this point, we've functioned in monarchies. So we don't really have countries yet. We have monarchies going on. And one of the Enlightenment period from about 1710, 15 to 1770, 80 is that time where all these new ideas are coming to the fore and things like the scientific method and encyclopedias and things like that. Okay, so in 1776, of course, in our own country, we have the Constitution, which begins with, I don't remember how it begins, but it's got the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in there. Or maybe there's like at any point somewhere in there, we're talking about the individual and the rights that we have. To be fair and to be precise, in the 1770s, the individual who has these rights is the dominant male. Women don't have voting rights, slaves, Black people, indigenous people, other types, other races, other ethnicities, whatever. The privilege of voting, the privilege of landowning and stuff is pretty much specific. We see that if you've done any ancestry work and you look at wills and how people pass stuff on, you see that they're specifically like I have an ancestor who had like four sons to whom he gave $1 each, and then his properties went to his wife for her use under the guidance of another son, and then when she died, it was dispersed among his adult male sons. So it's just the way that they were in that time. And in Europe, in France, we were looking at those Enlightenment ideas that kind of gave us the French Revolution. We see basically 3 time periods within the French Revolution. You have 1789, which is when it started. That's the date of it, 1792, where they're having the reformist ideas. And then in 1792, they declare themselves a republic, 1794. 1794 to 1799 is the third phase where they put together their constitution, and then they fall on economic hardships. Now, in the midst of all this, we have Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon, the little short guy with his hand in his coat jacket all the time. And he starts out as a general in the army, and then he becomes the first consul of the Republic. He's seen as this figure of reform, figure of glorious change, and the little man's, the little guy's hero. And here's a screenshot, a picture that portrays that battle outside one of the castles of Napoleon conquering the people. 1804, the dude crowns himself the emperor. Can't get away from that monarchical system. And then in 1815, has his final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. Okay, the Battle of Waterloo in Belgium. So one of the first things I'd like for you to write, just a quick sketch, just like a couple words. When did the French Revolution begin? You can include the 3 time periods. You can include any of that other stuff in there, but basically, historically speaking, when was the beginning of the French Revolution? And of course, that was 1789. And then Napoleon is on the scene at that time, and then comes in later, declares himself emperor. Those things, 1789, 1804, 1815, all those things line up with music that we're going to be looking at in interesting ways. All right, so one of the ideas is, again, we're just seeing these ideas of nations. The United States, which is not even at that time, it's just the 13 colonies, is one of those first places that declares itself a country in and of itself. Over in Europe, we saw monarchies, but the French now are declaring themselves free of monarchies, and they're becoming a state, a country. Similar things happening in England and Germany and some of the other countries around there. Poland always just getting kicked around. So the concept of a nation, a people with a common heritage, language, culture, and equal legal rights. Okay? Direct result of the Enlightenment. That idea comes from this revolutionary motto: liberté, égalité, fraternité. Liberty, equality, brotherhood. And just go ahead and jot that down in the note to me. What is the revolutionary motto? Liberté, égalité, fraternité, or liberty, equality, and brotherhood. Again, stemming from the Enlightenment. Okay, so one of the effects of that for music is that they start to write marches for their countries. They start to write more country-focused music. In fact, in the music world, there's this movement called nationalism. And that's not just music, it's also in the art and architecture. We have nationalism coming to the front. But these marches and these symphonies are written for public ceremonies. And then we have large choral works and revolutionary hymns and government-sponsored festivals and things like that that are coming to the front. In Paris, at the Paris Conservatory, they started training people based on the merit of their musicianship rather than on their class. Used to be from previous lectures that people who were upper class, or the people that took lessons and hired the musicians and all that. In the 1795, the Paris Conservatory began taking people based on their ability to make music, not on the level of class. In addition to all that that's going on, the Industrial Revolution, late 1700s, which began in Britain, and this is the mass production idea. Part of that's a consequence of people moving, and it works together. It's like chicken and egg. People moving into the cities becoming more concentrated population centers. We still don't have a city yet that's 1 million people, but we're getting people to move into the cities and work in the factories and create the mass production type stuff, which then, the country folk or the farmers start to make bigger farms because they have more industrially capable equipment. And then they provide more for the people that are working. And it's just this shift from an agrarian society or an agricultural society to an industrial society that happens in the Industrial Revolution. One of those things is that they can start mass producing instruments. Still have people like Guarneri and the M guy making instruments by hand, and top quality instruments, but overall you start to see mass-produced instruments as well. Okay, so Ludwig van Beethoven, 1770 to 1827. Those are the years, and this is the third thing I'd like for you to jot down in your note to me. The third thing is this: what are the years during which Ludwig van Beethoven lived? 1770 to 1827. So he's at the tail end of the Enlightenment. He's at the tail end of the classical movement, where he meets Haydn, he meets Mozart, he meets some of these great classical composers, and he lives past them into the 1800s. And he is a transitional figure into the Romantic era. Born in Bonn, studied piano and violin, moved to Vienna, gradual loss of hearing in 1922, 1850, and garnered guardianship of his nephew, for which he had a funeral procession later on with over 10,000 people. He has 9 symphonies, 11 overtures, and an overture is a piece that's written that typically would go at the beginning of an opera, or that would demonstrate the different music that's going to come up during the opera. In Beethoven's time, the idea of what an overture is began to expand beyond that opening of an opera into a piece by itself. 5 major piano concertos, 1 violin concerto, which is absolutely fabulous. 16 string quartets, 9 piano trios. Remember that a piano trio is a piano player, and then there's a violin, viola, and cello player as well. So it's kind of a quartet, but it's called a piano trio. Violin sonatas, cello sonatas, piano sonatas, operas, Fidelio, Missa Solemnis, which is a solemn mass, a mass in C major. Oh my gosh, all kinds of stuff in his lifetime that he wrote. He did that in basically what has turned out to be 3 main periods of his life, and these are all structured around things that are happening. His first works are in the 1770 to 1802 timeframe. He's in Bonn, and then his early years in Vienna, 1770 to 1802. And if you're thinking back to our French Revolution stuff, that is from his birth. He sees the French Revolution happening just around the corner across the border. He sees that French Revolution happening. He sees Napoleon Bonaparte, the common man guy, and he's getting all excited about that. And then in 1802, something happens. Well, you recall 1802 is what happened with that guy, Beethoven. No, not Beethoven. Napoleon Bonaparte. Yeah. What happened with Bonaparte? That's right. He declared himself emperor. 1802 to 1814, more drama, more. And in 1815, what happened to Napoleon Bonaparte in 1815? That's right. The Battle of Waterloo finished off his career as an emperor. 1827 is then when he died. So in introspective later work. So three main periods. And I'm just going to back up because I want you to just write the dates of those down. The three main periods, 1770 to 1802, 1770 to 1802. You're jotting that down. 1802 to 1814 is that second period. 1815 to 1827. We're going to talk a little bit about the music, some of the music from that first period. Then we're going to go into some of the music from the second period. I'm going to tell you now that when we get to that second period, the last thing that I'd really like you to think about writing down are a couple of major works from the second period. So when we move into that second period, I want you to be thinking about what are some of those major works. But let's look first at his first period. He started selling works to publishers when he was 21. This was new. Haydn, Mozart, all of the other people, pretty much everybody, although their names were recognized and they were starting to make commissions, they weren't really selling their stuff big time. Ludwig is one of these guys who starts selling to publishers, and eventually what we find out is that he lives off of his compositional material. Some of the other people weren't able to make it so much, but Beethoven had that success as a freelance musician. Oh, there's a quick, sweet little picture. Okay, first decade amateur market, increased his own skills, his own technical demands. Some of you experience that. As you work on stuff, as you practice your instrument, you see your skills increasing. Funny how that works. You practice, you get better. And so that's translating into his compositional skills and his compositional approaches. He starts to use frequent octaves and thick textures, and then changes in dynamics, building on the idea of the pianoforte that was now almost 100 years old. He's able to make those kinds of quick changes in the sound. And one of his early ones is the Pathetique Sonata, which is opus number 13. And I did not put in the video. Oh, I did. Okay, this is Daniel Barenboim. We're going to watch just a skosh of this. So here we go. Some of those loud. You can see down at the bottom, Adagio cantabile. Adagio being slow, a slow walking tempo. Cantabile is kind of a sing-song thing, and that lasts for about 9 minutes, and then he goes into the rondo, which is kind of around at a tempo of Beethoven. Sweet. Beethoven doesn't put his markings in times. He puts his markings in words, like Adagio, Allegro, Cantabile. One of the reasons for that is I'm going to leave you hanging there. One of the reasons for that is that, sorry, we don't want to watch that again. Oh, come on. There we go. The modern metronome was invented toward the end of Beethoven's life in about 1815, 16. So in 1817, I think it is, Beethoven went back to some of his other earlier works and translated and actually put in what we think of as tempo markings, like a quarter note equals 120, or quarter note equals 60, or half note equals 60, depending on whatever the tempo was. But it was those, but for him and for most composers, even today, that's a suggestion. They're really looking for a feel. They're looking for an idea about what it looks like for you. Okay, so that's first 18 string quartets, and this is a sweet little Ariel quartet playing string opus number 18, just a little bit of that as well. Okay, so taking a quick pause here. You have the unison opening thing, bum, blah, bum, 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 blah, bum, bum, and then the idea of the three accompanying instruments, the two gals and the guy on the right, the viola, the cello, and the guy on the right is playing second violin, and then the guy on our left is playing first violin, and he's carrying the melody. You're going to see that carried throughout here as much as we watch, where there's people are kind of providing that accompaniment to the first violin. This is echoing a change we talk about in composition class when we talk about the shift from writing counterpoint to writing in the chorale style for Bach, or in the tenore or the cantus firmus, moving up to the top line and becoming the soprano line, the bass line being the basic, one filler, and then bass of the chord, and then the two inner parts filling in and fleshing out what it is. Think of that as you're listening to this. This is kind of a strange shift. That's string quartet number 18, opus 18. And you can, it's a great piece. You can go listen to that some other time. Okay, so turns of phrases, unexpected turns of phrases, modulations that were just new to the people. Some acceptance, a lot of acceptance for that in the musical world. Some people just didn't like it, but that was Beethoven, and he was off on a new way. Symphony number 1 in C major, his first symphony, premiered in 1800. So he's at 30 years old. He worked on it for a few years. The slow introduction, it says, avoids the tonic cadence. Remember that tonic cadence is the 5-1, bringing that 2-1. So listen, we're going to play a little bit of that introduction, the dynamics, and then the woodwinds. So the modern trumpet is invented around 1815 to 1820. So we're still using older instruments like that, but the woodwinds have developed. Now we've got some more woodwinds coming on. In fact, when we think about the size of an orchestra for Mozart or for Haydn, we're looking at 25 to 30 players. And Beethoven's early symphonies, maybe 40 players, because of the winds that he's bringing in. By the time Beethoven's life ends in 1820s, 27, his 9th symphony is huge. Lots of instruments. The typical, if you were in an orchestra and conducting, and you were going to play a Beethoven, let's say Symphony number 6, you would just automatically be hiring 68 people. That's how many people it takes to play the Beethoven 6th. But the one small scherzo-like third movement, and let's, okay. I guess we're not going to listen to that. Maybe later, maybe in class. Okay, so the second period that we're coming into 1802 to 1814, 15. He's got a reputation now. He's starting to have competition. The publishers are coming to him and saying, "Can we do this?" Rather than him going to them. And then we have notebooks too of sketches that he did and things that were going on. It's also when he starts to experience his deafness. He really begins to take notice of that. In 1802, he took about a 6-month hiatus, went off into the woods somewhere, and went through a psychological crisis period in this 1802. It says there he considered suicide. And wound up writing what's called the Heilige Gestalt. And that's not it. That's the Heilige Gestalt Testament, which is where he was, the Heilige Gestalt or something. And it was just a declaration for himself that he was going to put up with being deaf. He was going to do what he could do. He was going to live the life that God had set before him, and against all obstacles set before him, live out the life to the fullest. His deafness didn't change, or actually got worse as time went on, but his attitude shifted, and then his compositions for the next couple of years begin to reflect some of those struggles that he went, wrong way, sorry, that he went through. This is not the testament. This is just some of the sketches. Okay. And I've got to keep moving. So he's using style characteristics of Haydn and Mozart, his predecessors, where he's using the genres and forms and the melodic types, phrasings, and textures. However, he expands those. He expands those ideas while shortening or decreasing the amount of material. So whereas a Mozart might write a 40 measure introduction, we listened to a couple of those in one of our previous lectures, where there's a 40 measure introduction, and then the piano dude came in with playing the piano piece, the piano concerto. Beethoven might write 100 measures of introductory material, in using less thematic material, but developing it more, and then having the guy come in. Beethoven's typical concerto or symphony might be 20 to 40 minutes long. Beethoven's symphonies are 40 minutes to an hour and a half long, depending on which one you're listening to. So he's expanding all kinds of stuff. One of his biggest works out of that time period, in the middle period, and this might be one that you write down because you are making note of a couple of his major works, is the Eroica Symphony, number 3, in E flat major. He wrote this. It's all about a testament kind of to himself, Beethoven's own heroism. He's looking back, having come through the Enlightenment period, and now looking at the French Revolution. He's looking back at the Greek and Roman literature and highlight some of their stuff as well. In the midst of all that, 1803 is when this came out, 1803 and 1804. In the midst of all that is when Napoleon declares himself emperor. Now, this was originally to be called the Napoleon Symphony or the Emperor Symphony. And when Napoleon did that, there's pictures of the actual manuscript where Beethoven erased that word and put in Eroica, or heroic symphony. He was so put out. So he was just done with Napoleon. And so he changed it. It was no longer about that guy. Now we have this is the opening I think we listened to a little bit of this the other day, maybe not. And then we have that echoing in another part, and then it comes back in with everybody. Just listen to a little bit of this opening movement of Beethoven's Symphony No. Just taking that little motif. See, this one is 55 minutes long in total. We're not going to listen to all of that, but you got to get the idea, and you hear some of the ways that he's using the woodwinds now to flesh out some of the things that are happening. And he's not using a lot of material, but he's using it in a lot of different ways. Just great stuff. Okay, so let's move on. Stop! Make it stop! Make it stop! Here we go. This one will work. Okay, symphony number 3, chromatic stuff going on, new themes. Let's skip a bit, brother. And then there's a lot of conflict later on as it gets into. You hear some of the conflict and resolution, the tension created with the dissonances that are new, really, to the music that's going on. If you think back to some of the Mozart and Haydn stuff, basically speaking, it's built on the 1 and 5 tonic and dominant chord situations, and sometimes the subdominant. And then you get into secondary dominants, and it's all related to each other there. With Beethoven, it's starting to just go wild on the ways of constructing things. Okay, so previously, right, this slide right here. Oops, come back. New form of motif, leaping figure without offbeat accents. Okay, so this leaping figure without the offbeat, cheek, 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 cheek. It's a new type of thinking for this stuff, and here we have a little bit of the thing again. We have the bassoon going da 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 da. The clarinet coming in da dee ba dee, and then the flute and oboes. So they combine to create this sense of the offbeatness. Okay. Oh, here we go. Symphony number 3. This is where it was scribbled out. Used to say something about Napoleon, and now it's the Eroica Symphony, the heroic symphony. Glad we got a chance to see that. Victory, confirmation in the recapitulation. And the recapitulation, again, is the recap. You know, we have the exposure or the exposition, we have the development, and then we have the recap. Third movement of that is the funeral march in C minor, mourning for a fallen hero. And then the final is the Prometheus, and Prometheus was a Greek story. I don't remember the story, but you might. Okay, so this is the second movement. It refers to the French Revolution, the French Republic. It imitates the roll of muffled drums and the revolutionary process. And it was again originally entitled "The Bonaparte." Listen to a bit of the funeral march from this, the Adagio. Straight things on, shut up, shut up. It's going to come back. I'll leave you hanging on that chord there, the secondary dominant of that. All right, so that's publicly premiered in 1805. Really hard for the congregation or the audiences to understand what was going on there. But he wasn't really worried about that. I mean, 1805, he's already wrestled with being deaf and knowing that's going to go away. He's being paid by the publishers. And this kind of is a nod. He's really not that much worried about how people think. He's pushing the boundaries. And one of the things we talk about when we talk about theory class or composition class is once you know the boundaries, once you know the rules, then you can push those rules a little bit and just create new stuff. Opera, Fidelio, his only opera. The libretto is a French Revolutionary opera. Again, he's writing about the times in which he's living. It was originally called Leonora, failed financially. It came out in 1814 with a new title, the Fidelio, and it was a very successful opera. Other stuff that he wrote was overtures to instrumental music, dozens of Lieder. A Lieder, if you're taking voice lessons, is German for song. A Lied is a song, a Lieder is a song for a song. Chamber music, as we talked about earlier on, 59 quartets, and then concertos, grander scale, the piano concerto, the violin concerto, a couple cello concertos, which is for an individual instrument playing with an accompaniment of an orchestra, an orchestral accompaniment. Another one of his symphonies written during this time, very familiar, symbolic of that struggle for him. Starts out in C minor, goes through the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation moves into C major. You hear the first movement all the time, and it's dominated by that four note motif. And then that rhythmic idea pops up in every movement. We're not going to listen to the whole thing, but if you did listen to the whole thing, you could hear that just throughout in different various ways. We are going to listen to enough. We're going to watch first a little bit of Barenboim. We watched Barenboim play piano a little bit. We're going to watch him conduct now. He is a much better conductor than this. But he does great on piano. Who am I? For him, we're going to watch this guy who just does a totally different way of conducting this opening. He gets them going, and then the orchestra just lives it themselves. He gets them going. We're going to go on, and I want you to listen to. We have this descending thing, and then we get past that opening 4 or 5 measures, and then the low strings start to bring it. And then if we go far enough, don't know that I will, but if we go far enough, we'll hear the basses very softly. Boom, 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 boom. Here we go. We're going to listen to it. It just comes right out and goes. Thank you. And up. Oh, what a fun piece. Fun to play, fun to listen to. What to do. Moving right along. Okay. Pastoral Symphony, number 6. That number 5 is so exciting, so victorious, so final. Oh my gosh. And the pastoral, number 6. Pastoral in and of itself means calm. It's like the calm after the storm. The scene by the brook is the andante movement. The woodwinds imitating bird calls. Just 5 movements long. Scenes from life in the country. It's called a character piece, and it's really the beginning of what turns into, throughout the 1800s, program music, where the music is starting to paint pictures for us about things that are going on. And this is one of those first. This is a little bit of that Beethoven Sixth Symphony, the 4th movement. Just listen to what's going on. Like you're in this storm. As a teenager, I recorded a thunderstorm sitting on my back porch, and it was coming in from the north, in the Naples area. And I kept it for, I would put it for about 45 minutes, kept it for many years. And you could just hear the approaching, couldn't hear the lightning anymore. But then it just got louder and more rambunctious, and then it passed over the house, and then it faded away. It was, I loved that recording. This fades away and goes into other stuff. Okay, so that's enough of that. So you got 3 different pieces that you can put into your email to me. We'll pick it up in our next lecture with the third part of Beethoven's life, and what was going on with him, and we'll finish it out. As with this, and from here on out, as I'm giving these video lectures, I'm going to ask you to be prepared to speak certain things or to write certain things. So feel free to go ahead and have your email open or piece of paper where you can jot it down and fill it in for me. All right, there you go. The first 2/3 of Beethoven's life.